Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Nicole Friedman. My pronouns are she or they. I'm the Director of Operations for United Pride of Champaign County. Thank you so much to those of you who joined us in person for some of our educational programming for the 2022 CU Pride Fest. Also, those of you watching at home, you heard applause. There really are people here. Thank you to those of you who joined us at home. And we know that because we stream these and leave them up, people are watching after the fact. Thank you to those of you who have taken time out to watch this later on. Let's just pretend I'm from the future. This was a great panel. You've made a great choice. We have so much going on this week. If you're watching live, please do go to our website, unitedpride.org. Check out all the rest of the Pride Fest programming. And know that we are also a year-round organization that produces things, well, all year round. So you can check out more about that on our website as well. But without further ado, I'm going to bring up one of the people who helped create all of this educational programming for us to kick it off, Matthew Rivas-Cole.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. And I want to thank everybody for being here. You know what? We good? Okay. So my name is Matthew Rivas-Cole, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Illinois, and I work with Uniting Pride to deliver educational sessions like this one to communities and organizations all around Illinois. And I've been doing this LGBTQ cultural competency type of training since 2017. And this was when Texas Tech University, where I was at the time, which is in Lubbock, Texas, it's a very conservative area, we opened our very first office of LGBTQIA education and engagement on campus. And my primary role at the time was delivering trainings to people across the university and community. And let me tell you, in 2017 in Lubbock, Texas, this was a lot of new information for people, and we encountered a lot of resistance. And so I found that during that time, the way I handled that resistance really was a deciding factor as to whether I could bring people into the conversation or people put up their defenses and just completely shut down and shut me out. So I know that everybody here has been in some of those situations before where you've had to handle difficult conversations, and that's really daunting to figure out. So we have a panel of brilliant experts today from very diverse backgrounds to help us think about how we can talk through some of these difficult conversations and handle resistance. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So please first help me welcome our panelists with a round of applause.
That's me.
It's all you.
Hi, everybody. I'm the Reverend Leah Roberts-Moser. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And for the past 13 years, I've been the straight girl who's the pastor of the church with the rainbow flags hanging from it. So I'm the pastor of Community United Church of Christ. We're located at the corner of 6th and Daniel in Champaign. I want to invite you all to worship on Sunday. It's our annual Pride Fest worship service, and it's the end of a worship series, get this, called Word Became Flesh, Liberating Narratives of Shame. Ooh, I've been preaching about sex for the past 4 weeks. It's been really good. By way of introduction, we were asked to tell you our general philosophy in dealing with resistance and sort of where that comes from. And I would just start by saying that I believe, and I know, that really building relationship is the thing that lessens resistance. And it gets us a lot further than arguing with somebody. And at the same time, if you want to argue, I'm glad to argue, and I'll probably win at the argument. But I really think relationship is the thing that gets us there. And for me, that philosophy is born out of the picture on the far, your right-hand side. I'm the girl who's smiling, not the girl who's snarling. And that little baby on Grandpa's lap, maybe 13 years to the day after this photo was taken, hauled me outside of Grandma's house into the snow and said to me, this is my cousin, and he said to me, Leah, I'm gay. And I said, I know. And he said, how do you know? And I said, because you and I had the same reaction to the volleyball scene in Top Gun. I know that you are gay. And then he asked me not, what will grandma think of me, or what will your parents think of me, or none of that. He asked me, what does God think of me? And that really became the moment when I knew, as a person who had already discerned a call to ministry, that part of my vocational work needed to be being an advocate for the LGBTQ community. So that's been part of my work since I was ordained. I was also, as a founding member of the Gay Straight Alliance at Hanover College. I studied feminist liberation theology in college. I don't know what Mike Pence studied at Hanover, but it was not that. But just to speak more to my philosophy of dealing with resistance. Again, I speak from the perspective of being a Christian and being an ordained person. So I find the Wesleyan quadrilateral really helpful, and that is the combination of scripture, tradition, reason, and experience in building my response to people as a Christian person. So from that, there's sort of three guiding principles that I have whenever I'm meeting resistance with folks, especially whenever people come at me with the clobber passages, those like 6 or 7 passages that people point at and they're like, you're not supposed to be gay, and they take the Bible and they use it as a weapon. From a scriptural perspective, one, I would say, Marcus Borg, who's an American theologian, said we're supposed to take the Bible seriously, not literally. So that's really one of those things that I hold on to in building that philosophy. The other piece about just how it is that we look at scripture is that from a biblical perspective, like if we look at the ancient culture whose literature we are reading, they thought that anything that could make your life harder or could kill you was equal to God's wrath. Which is why, when we look at Leviticus, the line that says, a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, is really close to don't eat shellfish and don't eat pork and don't weave together fibers of 2 different comings. Because all of those things make your life harder or could kill you. And so like whenever we're reading this sort of ancient code about how to live, that's where that comes from. Just from a scriptural perspective, I would say the last piece is that the ancient world really revolved around these like male-headed households. And if you have a man, like a man is with a woman, then you have this emasculation of men. We see that pop up in modern day culture all the time, right? But in the ancient world, that didn't work. But I found in meeting resistance from people that they really don't want to get into the details like that. It's good for queer people to know those details so that you can release yourself of your own shame. But people who are arguing with me about whether or not gay people are going to go to heaven or whatever their argument is doesn't work. So I finally come down to saying, okay, so if you're going to quote all of this scripture to me, then tell me, have you sold everything that you have and given it to the poor to follow Jesus? No, you've not done that. Then we're making choices. So then let's talk about the choices that you are making about fear and ignorance. Rather than the choices that you're making to love people, and to love people into wholeness and good living. Again, I really think that relationship is the thing that changes people's minds. It's the thing that loosens our grip on resistance. And I would also say that it's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because as the straight girl, It's not personal for me, which means you can always tag team with me or with the other straight advocates in your life and say, I can't go build a relationship with this person because it hurts too much. You go do that. And that's one of the things that I get to do and that I should be doing in the world.
We all need a straight girl like Leah on our side. That's what I'm hearing.
I'll take out my earrings.
Thank you, Leah.
Yep.
Courtney.
All right. I don't know how close to get to the mic because this is
Closer.
and I need to like scream into it, right? Great.
That's screaming?
Wonderful. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Courtney Cuthbertson. My pronouns are they, them. In my work life, I'm an assistant professor and extension specialist in human development and family studies here at the university. Not be fully inclusive, but these are people in my own life and then people whose work I've read and listened to and studied that inform the perspective that I have. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology. I got my master's and PhD in sociology, and in my work, I am interested in addressing or understanding how it is that we have traumatic social events and circumstances that happen that result in individual mental health and substance use problems. How is it that we have these traumatic social circumstances that result in individual suffering? But my interest and curiosity is not so much about mental health and substance use as issues in and of themselves, but as case studies or examples of what we might be able to envision as a different possible future. Why is it that we don't have community care? Why is it that we end up with a system that individually labels people and tells them you have to be responsible for your own care rather than being connected with the people around us? And I include Foucault here because that was a major nearest influential to my studies and attention to power. And I feel like the more I am studying and learning and engaging my curiosity, the more that I'm seeing the way that power shows up. And that for any sociology nerds, I'm thinking about the sociological imagination. Steve Wright Mills, who was talking about the idea that we can see things sociologically, we can see things differently when we understand our private issues are actually public problems. These are things that are connected. The issues you have are not only your own, someone else is experiencing this too. And it's my belief that the more that I investigate these things and ask questions, that it's the role of power to invert that in the public sphere so we have an idea that we are all isolated, we're all on our own. And we have to have these battles by ourselves. And from a social constructionist lens that I often use, we made all of this up. We don't have to do it this way. And if it's not working, why are we fixing it? It just is baffling to me. So we don't have to live in a world where we see homophobia, transphobia, and oppression for LGBT folks. But we also must recognize the interconnectedness of all oppressions that we're experiencing. So liberation for queer folks is tied up with liberation from racist, white, colonialist, heteropatriarchy. And this type here is very small. It says, friends don't let friends plot, dismantle the imperialist, white supremacist capitalists ever make everything wrong. We have to do this work together. And the things that got me here are my academic background, but also things from my personal life. I put on the slide that I'm a wordsmith. I pay attention to language because language shapes the understandings we have of the world. It shapes our assumptions, what things are norms, and the way that we understand how things work. I think part of the way that I got so interested in that, I didn't get around a lot when I was little. I was born in Japan, I moved to Michigan, I moved to Los Angeles, and by the time I was 11, I was in Quincy, Illinois, from Los Angeles, moving from, to a county where that was the time for 2 hours. I didn't find it to be a very welcoming space. Sorry, Mom, and also bye. In moving so much as a young person, I felt that I was trying to learn how to navigate different social settings and understanding of what are the relationship expectations here, and how can I watch and try to figure this out? What are the words people use, and do the words that they say align with their actions? And when they don't, why is that? Who is it serving? And how do I understand what's actually serving the things that I care about and what's not? So I could talk for a lot longer, but
I think that's just for me as a wordsmith. I rely on them very much for handling difficult wordings. Wording always knows what to say. So I'm sorry to put you that.
It's been wonderful to hear both perspectives and life experiences so far, so it's awesome. So, hi everybody, my name is Alejandro Gomez, and I use he and his pronouns. I'm currently the Senior Assistant Director at the Counseling Center here at the University of Illinois. I work there for the past 10 years. My colleagues right there. It's been an honor and a privilege working in this position. I love working with the college student population. And like I said, I've been doing that for the last 10 years. So a lot of the work that I'm currently doing with mental health, counseling, and therapy has revolved around college students, emerging adults as my client's population that I'm predominantly working with. I've actually lived here for the last 22 years, going on 23 years, so that's shocking to hear actually, to say it out loud. So I actually went to undergrad here, did my graduate studies here, and I'm currently also doing my graduate studies here, so it's a small school. So I did my undergrad here in sociology, with a focus on social justice and the law. Then did my master's in social work, and I'm currently finishing my dissertation for an equal, so college education, and I'm researching how Latinx college students conceptualize mental health, which is an important topic, not too many people tend to talk about that. So over the course of the last 22 years, I've learned to love this city. It wasn't, a full embrace, open arms at first. So navigating these spaces, I do have that unique perspective that a lot of our college students have. Identifying as queer, trying to navigate these spaces, and even over the course of the last 22 years, these spaces have changed drastically. Over the years, I have worked at Carl Foundation Hospital here, PACE, in community health center, known as Rosegrace they call it. So I work with different populations within the realm of mental health and also medical social work. So over the course of my professional and personal lived experiences, I believe it's informed my work with involving diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Oh, that's my slide. I refer everybody my face up here. So I can't say that's me, but so part of my professional and personal journey has brought me to this point. Trying to be as fierce of an advocate as I can. Obviously outside of the mental health space, because when it's one-on-one in the room, I honor that relationship and that therapeutic lines with my clients. However, resistant they may be, whether it's resistance in terms of other people's identities, queerness, things of that nature. It tends to show up, but then also outside of that too, and it's a interesting phenomenon because a lot of people would say, oh, why are you being such a fierce advocate, or why are you saying that I'm just supposed to be this gentle kind of therapist, And I'm like, well, I am a therapist, but I'm not your therapist. It was one-on-one, and obviously not be a different story. So, but yeah, the earrings come off. But yeah, with all my training and my counseling experiences, I feel like it's informed me to have this unique perspective to be able to sit in spaces like this and share that and lend that and pay it forward, so to speak. So a couple of previous ones. Sorry, Dave, I didn't give you the look. With a couple of my approaches and guiding principles, I do tend to poke at that golden rule that people say you should treat others how you want to be treated, but that's very egocentric. So I always tend to tell people you should treat others how they want to be treated. And with that comes conversations, community. You have to engage them, you have to find out about their lives, their own unique perspectives, and so that you can treat them how they want to be treated versus how you expect to be treated. So, always in a constant state of learning. So when it comes to cultural competency and humility, even for ourselves, people may regard us as experts, but it's not this platform or this, point in our lives where we say to ourselves, we've made it. We don't have to go any further than this. We're always constantly learning, and that's what I try to emphasize with each and every person that I come across. Listening goes a long way, and trying to learn from other people's perspectives, no matter how much they're great. So unfortunately, a lot of the times the resistance that we see, it's not them, that sole individual. This is something that we learned, something that was ingrained in them over the years, their home environments that they were raised in, so that can help as far as not taking things personally. It doesn't acknowledge it, it doesn't excuse the actions of what we're doing, but it does tend to take the focus off of ourselves and question ourselves, like, well, is there something wrong with me? Which can be, very common for us queer folk, while we're growing up and starting to navigate these spaces and conversations. And then another guiding is patience. I know I can't change a person, a consistent person, especially just overnight. It's going to take some time. I spoke about my shared lens, my shared experience of so in that, we take my fitness classes, and so inside that, I gain the look, gear up the resistance a little bit. So
The earrings do come up.
I have a different tone and voice. And so I put up this slide, and I titled it "Using a Wise Mind." And if you're not in the therapy lingo, listen in. This is this healthy balance of using logic and an emotional state, and trying not to always respond with one too heavily one over the other, and trying to find this fine balance. There are times, obviously, when we have to react. It does make sense to react in a more logical way versus emotional way. I like to kind of describe it as Kurt and Spock. It's like one's logical, one's emotional, but as a pair, they work great together as a team. So addressing and handling microaggressions. This is one of the key conversations that I tend to have with queer students on how to navigate this campus and these spaces here in the community. I always approach microaggressions from a learning standpoint and trying to be open and curious rather than shaming and blame. And I always tell people there are different scenarios, there are different situations to go about it, right? There are moments where we can let it go. There are moments where you can speak out against it right there and then. Sometimes you have to really think about it, weigh it out, and then come back to that person, maybe individually or privately. So it varies. I always tell individuals that yeah, if you don't know, if you need more clarity, it's okay to ask questions. And, try to be open about handling microaggressions, or when somebody calls you out on microaggressions. And rather than saying, oh, that wasn't what I meant, rather than coming on this defensive, just be open about it, and trying to find out how it impacted that individual. Because again, intent does not supersede impact. All right. Heat of the moment and hurt people. These two come together. So when people come out of relationships and getting hurt, as a protective mechanism, they tend to in turn hurt other people, unfortunately, and it comes out in hurtful ways. So again, this lends to that perspective that when you learn about someone's history, someone's past, and where they're coming from, again, it doesn't take away the fact that they're going to be action, or it doesn't, excuse them, but at least it takes that, certain pressure off of ourselves that, hey, there's something wrong with me and you're treating me this way because of it. We don't take it personally. So at the end, it's really not about us. It's about them and something involved in their past, unfortunately. Family affairs, this is one of those questions where we're prompted, sometimes students, especially when they're going home for the holidays or the break, it comes out that maybe there's an extended family that's going to be there, and rather than looking forward to spending time with family, so it's going to be there. That's also an open conversation that we have. And just by the way, as a therapist, I never try to tell a person what to do and give them advice. We just try to weigh out all the pros and cons and, weigh out the choices and, look at their values. So I love what both of you said, because it's a lot of these conversations we have there. So again, how are you going to navigate this piece? Do you want to let it go? Do you want to not show up? Do you want to have that conversation? So sometimes the context goes a long way, especially for me, personally speaking, having like an 80-year-old abuela, whose health is not the best, and maybe, on her deathbed, and not coming out to her yet. Do I really want to have that conversation? She's very conservative, and, I don't know if that's something worth bringing up, knowing, because there are certain situations where you know how someone's going to react. There are certain situations where you don't know how someone's going to react. There are certain situations where you think you know, and they're going to react the opposite way. So it's again, not a clear set scientific way to approach this or these conversations. It's different from the situation, the person, the family, and the context behind it. So, and then the last thing that I'll talk about is this internalized oppression or resistance that unfortunately a lot of people take in. And so whether it be internalized homophobia, heterosexism, internalized sexism itself, all these things may lead to, unfortunately, feelings of inadequacy. It can lead to a lot of self-hatred with the queer community and individuals. And then it's this piece, where I focus a lot on my area, decolonizing therapy, in a sense, and from that liberation model. It's these exaggerated conformity, it's exaggerated conformity to the, dominant norms that culture tends to throw at us. So, a lot of times this internalized resistance and oppression can lead to guilt and shame, which can show up in many different ways, unfortunately: anxiety, depression, suicide rates within the queer community. And the last thing I'll say is, in terms of meeting resistant people, I tend to not try to go to changing the person, but trying to be as least resistance in order for that change to happen organically.
Thank you. And I think that's a perfect segue into the first question that I wanted to ask all of you. As an educator in this space over the years, I've gotten two competing pieces of advice, orientations as to how to approach people. And one is to go for the heartstrings or to go to that emotional side, and the other is to go for the facts, armed and ready with facts, and we can take them down, sort of thing. And I know that it's not perfect, you can't do one or the other necessarily perfectly, but I'm curious what your general tendency is to go for the heartstrings or to go for the facts. So this is for all of you to answer. And we can kind of get into more of a conversation model. Feel free to jump in.
I think a combination of both works really well. There's a workshop that I've been giving for most of my professional career called Biblical Self-Defense for LGBTQ people, which is happening a week from tomorrow, by the way, at the Champaign Public Library. And in the past, 10 years, United Church of Christ churches have brought me in to do that workshop for their congregations, especially when their congregations are working through the process of becoming open to and affirming LGBTQ people. And so I show up with my slideshow and all the clever passages and we talk and all those. But each slide comes with a story, right? Because I can talk about David and Jonathan in the Bible, and I can talk about the fact that our cultural biases and heterosexism and patriarchy and all of those things can come into play in the interpreting of that passage forever, which is why most biblical commentaries are like, I don't know, I think they were just good friends. I can say that to people, and then I can tell them the story of campus ministry student named Harrison, who told me once that he would come home every Sunday from his big, Bible-believing church, and the pastor may have done a sermon that, told him that he was going to hell. And he would come home and he would open his Bible and he would read the story of how David and Jonathan loved each other. And he would say, David is said to be a man after God's own heart. And if David and Jonathan can love each other like this, then I must be okay. And then you watch everybody go, right? And people soften when you can take the personal story and you can put it with facts. Sometimes people just don't know, like what you were saying, their background, they just have had bad information their whole lives. And so you have to help them unlearn what they think they know.
I was going to chime in and say that that's the same thing for me. It tends to be a combination. It tends to be all logic. Sometimes that's when you can get very resistant people and just go on in circles, and so I try to then bring it into the emotional kind of side of things and try to, implement people's perspectives, lived experiences, how it tends to affect and negatively impact and hurt other people. Rather than just be logical all the time. So sometimes, especially in a therapy where you can just go on in circles. So I tend to do a little bit of kind of combination because it is information getting a lot of times, and it's that's it, a good balance of both taking context into play.
That's what came to mind for me too, that it's very context dependent. Who's the person that you're talking with? Are they really invested in the relationship and conversation, or are they just trying to be disinterested antagonists? I think that earlier in my life, I was very committed to if people just know the facts and the statistics, they will be moved enough to change their viewpoints. And that didn't work for me a lot. And it was actually, I heard you mention, Melanie Morrison up on your slide. So Melanie Morrison is an incredible human and has developed a workshop called Doing Our Own Work, which is an anti-racism seminar for white people that I did in 2017. And that was a turning point in my life and being able to see when people say that they care about something, what is the value that's underneath that? And when they are trying to make these arguments that are racist or queerphobic, what is it that they think they're saying they care about? And how can I connect to them and say, well, I hear that what you care about is your community, I hear that what you care about is your family, I care about family too. And here's what this means to me, here's how this impacts me. And I think that we have a way of intellectualizing things. I did this for sure. It could be an element of whiteness as well, intellectualizing the emotional because it feels too vulnerable to share how we actually feel and how things actually come home for us. But I think that vulnerability is sharing that as an opportunity for connection that can build relationships. But we have to make wise decisions about when it's safe to be vulnerable and when it's not, because it's not always safe. So I think the combination of, facts and go with it, the values emotional part, and you have to make decisions based on context.
I think you bring up a really good point, that safety is always the number one concern, because we can give people the tips and tricks and arm people with these sorts of things to say all day, but ultimately you have to decide what's safe for you. I appreciate some of the Brene Brown vulnerability language coming in there, and I also like both of you know the fact that it's not in you, it's in this other person, so trying to understand what this other person's goal is. I think that can relieve some of the shame or tension that we feel. I want to also open up to the audience. We have questions prepared, but we would love to hear from audience members. So does anybody want to ask a question, or we can continue while you think of your questions? We also have people online who are free to participate as well, so we can get those read in. All right, I know you're thinking of some great questions. So I think another aspect of this is it can be really exhausting to be the person that responds to resistance. And I've heard people say, I can't have these conversations with people because I just get so mad, and all I want to do is leave. I don't want to hear negative comments about LGBTQ people, whether it's because it's an identity of their own or something that they care about. So this person asks you, I know it's not always helpful to just storm away, but sometimes I feel like that's all I can do. What advice do you have for these types of situations for managing your own emotions, but also feeling an obligation to respond?
I'll continue with my, these are great questions. I kind of included it in my slide anyway. But yeah, having these conversations of, one of these instances, I would probe a little bit more and ask questions like, what's the context behind these conversations? Who have you had these conversations with? How has this response kind of worked for you, and how in what ways has it not worked for you? Because at times I can acknowledge the fact that, hey, in that space, when it comes to matters of safety, yeah, that it makes sense to let it go in the moment, versus when does it, feel right to kind of acknowledge it right there and then, maybe sit on it a little bit more and then bring it back. But I think taking it away from the sense that it's something that they need to fix or they need to acknowledge, and then bringing it back to this piece of like that hurt people, unfortunately hurt people. And sharing that perspective, I think, goes a long way for individuals to, not take away that point that there's something wrong with what they're doing or how they're responding. And going back to that piece about your values, speaking truth to that. How are your behaviors tied to your values that you're currently following? And is that one that you're going to continue with, or do we want to change something? Those are always constant conversations that we tend to have with individuals in those spaces.
I just keep thinking of that Indigo Girls lyric that says, I have no need for anger with intimate strangers. I think it's really important for people to gauge the risk and reward in engaging in those moments. Do you have enough capacity in the moment to respond in a way that isn't going to send you like spiraling for 3 days or to bed for a week because you're just gutted? And also, how much emotional bank account do you have with this person who's arguing with you? And do you have enough emotional bank account to draw on to make the risk worthwhile? I think those are really important things to weigh. But also, like having somebody that you can tag team with in those moments. Like if you're going into a situation or if you find yourself in a situation where somebody's arguing with you and you don't have somebody who you can tag and say like, I have to step away from this conversation, then I don't think it's worth the risk. Because I also think that we're supposed to treat people with the same measure, you know, that we love ourselves with. But I really wish Jesus would have said it the other way. He would have told us how to love ourselves completely and fully, so that we can love people in the same measure. Because you can't do anything from an empty tank, ever.
I really appreciate what's been shared on this question so far. There's really important things to be considering here. I totally agree in terms of considering your own capacity. It's okay to walk away, and for people in minoritized, marginalized identities, we don't have to be doing education constantly. If we can opt out, then that's okay. In situations where we decide that it's safe enough to show up and try to say something back, I think the sense of being overwhelmed and angry is important to pay attention to. What does it tell you that you care about, and how do we slow it down? I think that so many of these experiences with difficult conversations and resistance, I feel that too. My heart rate goes up and my thoughts start racing, and I wonder, how do I say the right things in the right set of words in a way that's going to be compelling enough that this person's going to stop and just have this light bulb moment and everything is shit for them? And that's not often how this works. So I think about this. What is the thing that I need in this moment? What I need to do is take a deep breath and slow the whole conversation down. And how can I do that? I can do that by asking questions. I can do that by saying, wow, I'm not really sure what to say right now, but that was upsetting. And I'm wondering if we can talk about it. Slow it down. It doesn't have to go fast. You can help to set the parameters for the conversation to be in such a way that it serves you and what you need in that moment too. I think that it's also really important to have places to process experiences like this, whether that is a good friend or a good journal or a good therapist or just some outlet to process all of these things that happen.
Thank you. I think it was a really good piece of advice. Do we have any questions from our audience? Yeah, there's a microphone out, or you can just speak it.
Running. There's the microphone. No? Yes? No? Yeah.
Can you speak more to processes of doing your work collaboratively or collectively?
So the question is, can you speak more to doing your work, processing of doing your work collectively or collaboratively? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
It's a little bit open, but just in terms of, the work that you do, how do you see that as part of a larger picture, as part of a larger collective of people trying to do similar work, perhaps similar values?
How do you see the work you're doing as part of a larger picture of people who are doing similar work or having collective values? I think that's a really great question.
I think it takes showing up repeatedly and seeing who else shows up repeatedly, and seems to ask similar questions or have similar perspectives. I think it's also recognizing that speaking back to resistance can look like a lot of things. Something that comes to mind is the Toulon Library's Display for Pride Month, and there was a lot of pushback online and social media, and then unfortunately I think it was 3 pastors from different churches who wanted to show up to say that that's something the library shouldn't do. So understanding that people might have different backgrounds and different skill sets and different spheres of influence, if you will. So I showed up to that board meeting, and instead of trying to talk to the maybe the detractors there or the people who were speaking out against the pride display, I made everything I said thanking the library staff for what they did because it matters. And so figuring out who are the people that we can be in community with by showing up and trying to connect on those common values, understanding that I don't do the work that a librarian does, and thank you librarians for doing what you do. And that display was something where I can show up and say, this really matters that you did this, and that's really great, and you must have an understanding of how important libraries are for young queer kids in rural communities. So this is super awesome, and thank you. And I think that finding ways to express appreciation for what you see other people doing is a really good way to build connection.
I personally love doing outreach and just cross collaborating and working with other people. I think it helps build a sense of hope, a sense of community, and instills agency in other people who see our work and working together. When it comes to things like this, it can be emotionally exhausting and draining if it's just, you know, one person doing the work or, you know, calling people out or things of that nature. It's, you know, a lot of times, you know, we get a big sense of agency, like I mentioned, and a lot of other information that we might not come across just working collaboratively with other individuals. We get shared perspective, it instills diversity, and so I always appreciate working with other individuals and sharing the load, so to speak.
So being a local church pastor, I wear lots of different hats. So, yes, I'm a worship leader and a spiritual leader for community people, but we're also a social service agency because we do a community meal. We're also a platform for justice because we speak into the public square theologically about things that are happening in the world. So I'm always checking myself with different colleagues from different disciplines to figure out like what's the middle of that Venn diagram, and adjusting and figuring out how it is that I can show up in my collar and be the religious expert in the room, because that comes with a certain amount of privilege, and also, I'm also one of those specificities too. So that's why I do that.
And I was just going to say, I really appreciate when it comes to meeting resistant people that working collaboratively with other people with straight allies, it lets me a perspective, lend perspective to that other individual that might be resistant, because they might say at the end of the day, well, you're queer, it's expected that you would feel and think this way, and what versus they, you don't see via, and see her as a straight ally, and it questions their own line of thinking and how they feel. So it's quite powerful.
Yeah, I think you bring up really great points about the community. You talked about the emotional bank account earlier, and you think how you have to have income deposited into that emotional bank account, right? And having these communities and sources of support to you is good, and it can kind of act as that. I want to touch on that as being the straight ally, and I've heard from people that, I'm a straight person, I don't feel like it's my place to speak up for queer issues, or maybe I shouldn't be the one in the room to stand up and talk on this issue. How would you respond to somebody who says that?
Speak up or help make safe environments by asking what we need, and ask yourself how you talk about us when we're not in the room.
I ask that question all the time. I asked when I got this invitation, I was like, are you sure that you want me to do this? As the straight person who endeavors to be an advocate and an ally, I'm so appreciative of the way that you said that. I'm always sort of gauging where I am in the room, where I am in the conversation, and how it is that I use my voice, but also understanding the particular power that my voice comes with. And also, right, the intersectionality of being a woman, and being a Christian person and all of those kinds of things.
I think asking engaging like questions of how they're showing up as an ally, rather than just being performative allyship and just writing your pronouns down on an email thread or things of that nature. Like, what else are you doing? How are you speaking up? Speaking up. Are you being an advocate? Are you donating? Things of that nature. Like, are you doing a human rights campaign or BIPOC, trans community? Things of that nature. I think it goes a step further rather than just what's the simplest things.
Absolutely. And I think my response to you, Leah, when you asked me was, please, I'm tired. Right? So I think it is really, really important to have straight allies. And these are really good reminders too, that it can't just be performative, because that can be harmful in its own right. Do we have another audience question? So we have time for one more question, and I thought that you brought this up in your introduction, and I thought that it was something really valuable that we should cover. But resistance doesn't always come from other people; it comes from within us too. And so I think a lot of queer people have, their own unique journeys. I know I do, of dealing with that resistance within myself. And so I was wondering if you could speak to, how you might respond to somebody who is not encountering resistance from other people necessarily, but really struggling with themselves.
I got an email just this week from somebody who named this very thing for themselves. This happens all the time in my ministry. Every January, we have this worship service that coincides with remembering the baptism of Christ, where we invite people to come forward and the baptismal font there, dip my hand in the water every time. I'm soaked by the time we're done with this worship service. Dip my hand in the water and cup each person's cheek and look them in the eye and say, I'm a beloved child of God. And I know the people who struggle with this, because they lean into my hand and say, no. And they're saying, I know, because they don't know. And so, just at every turn, trying to remind people that you are a beloved child of God. God has not made a mistake in making you. That you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And everything about who you are, and the way that you move through and in this world as a gay man, as a lesbian woman, as a bisexual person, as a pansexual person, in your trans body, in your queer body, everything about that is a blessing and a gift. So I just try to remind people of that all the time. All the time.
I think when I'm working with individuals, my brain comes out. So I'm with shame and vulnerability, and how shame tends to be the root, of all kind of bad secondary emotions, anger, frustration, and jealousy, and it can manifest into depression, anxiety, and just having those conversations about how, just internalizing these big norms that society, culture, or upbringing has been throwing at us, and how we internalize it, can really lead to issues with our own self-esteem, our own self-worth. So I definitely come at it from the self-compassion piece of here. Dr. Kristen Neff is another big hitter when it comes to, so Lorraine Brown is the big hitter when it comes to shame and vulnerability. Kristen Neff is the other professional who's a big hitter on self-compassion. So I try to encourage individuals to read her work on this beautiful work on self-compassion. That and trying to treat ourselves as if how we would treat our best friend or another person. That's sometimes can be the most difficult process that somebody can learn to engage with in their lives. So I do a heavy dose of running around person.
I'm glad somebody brought up Kristen Neff, because I was thinking similarly about self-compassion, and when we find these thoughts coming up, how do we check in with ourselves and say, is this the kind of thing I would tell my best friend? These things, the stories I'm telling myself, would I tell this to another person? The other things that come to mind, build ways to remind yourself that you matter, and you matter because you exist and you're here. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of love and respect and being treated right. The way that people respond negatively is a reflection of themselves. And sometimes it can be hard to remember that. So the thing that I've done is I have a little phone on my phone with messages to remind myself. Things are really challenging. What are the things I know I need to hear? And how can I make that part of a practice for myself? So having ways that you can process, I think, are really helpful when those messages come up and they're really loud in our minds.
Thank you. I think this is a great way to wrap it up and reminding us how important it is to take care of ourselves. I asked each of you here tonight because I look up to each of you and the work that you do and the decisions you're in and your experiences. So I know I've learned a lot, but I'll take it with me and I hope others have too. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.